let's welcome to the program. We've got Mr. Tim Jacob on the phone. Tim, it's always great to have you on, sir. You're a term limits advocate. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for allowing me to be on this morning.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. You know, listen, I think term limits is a good idea. I think taking it from 16 down to 10 is a good idea. I know there are other people that disagree. They can make arguments to the contrary, and, I respect those people, and I can respectfully disagree with them and agree to disagree and hopefully work together on other issues. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. There does seem to be some legislators out there who are, coming out and saying, listen, we think this is a terrible idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing, and I'm very grateful that we're having this debate this time, because in 2014, when the legislature put through that fraudulent amendment and deceptive amendment, we did not have that debate. So I'm glad that after a 3-year bout of laryngitis that some of them have gotten their voice back. And I think it's healthy when we debate this statewide. Good people can disagree about this, but everyone can agree that deception does not work in Arkansas and has no place in Arkansas politics. And that's exactly what the legislature and the lobbyists did in 2014.
And that is a great point, and I feel like that to me is the one reason, is probably my biggest motivator to vote for this. Aside from the fact, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, do you think 16 years is good, or do you think a decade is good? And I'm like, okay, a decade's fine. Let's, you go past a decade, it really can become a career, and not for career politicians. But the main thing here, and I've been trying to talk about this a little bit, is that what John Woods did, and, convicted felon John Woods, and now really the rest of the General Assembly too, and I know there were people that did speak out against it at the time, but like you said, there wasn't this kind of debate that we're having right now. Now we're having a much broader debate with more people involved. Our own government lied to the people intentionally. They intentionally, we can blame most of it on John Woods, but the fact is the rest of the General Assembly voted for it. They voted for the title, and it went there. It was deceptive, and our own government lied to us, and now the people are taking the pendulum, and we're attempting to swing it back. And I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. I think that's a healthy thing.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's very healthy, and let's be sure to point out that senators can now stay 22 years, depending on how those 2-year terms fall. 22 years is not a term limit. That's a limit that anybody who doesn't believe in term limits could live with. So it's gone from 22. And here is the question Arkansas voters have to ask themselves. Do we want to live by an amendment written in silence by a convicted felon who's defrauded the state of Arkansas, or are we going to have an amendment written by the people that, in most part, has already won 2 landslide elections?
Mm-hmm.
We've got to decide whether the legislature is going to set their own terms or the people are going to have to say so. The biggest problem with this issue is that we've had 2 statewide landslide elections, and the so-called representatives of the people do not represent the people. They have not accepted the will of the people. They have not accepted the vote. They haven't respected voters, and they haven't respected the vote. And we have to get back to that situation here.
One of the, negative aspects of this, according to the opponents of this term limits initiative that's on the ballot, is that bureaucrats will be empowered, and that bureaucrats love the idea of term limits because they are able to trick and dupe ignorant legislators who don't have a grasp of how things work when they first get down there. Can you respond to that criticism?
Nothing could be further from the truth. No bureaucratic organization has ever supported strict term limits. In fact, they've worked, if you look at the 2004 campaign that we ran statewide, that 75 out of 75 counties said no to the legislature. Where did the bureaucratic organizations fall in that funding? They fell on the side of the legislators. Same thing goes with lobbyists. I hear lobbyists are going to gain power and they're going to have control over freshmen. Well, lobbyists don't support these term limits. In fact, one of the
think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hey, folks, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us today. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. We want you to be a part of that, and you're listening to it. Certainly, it's like half the battle, if you will. If you want to contribute or sound off, 870-275-9799 is the telephone number. You can also sound off over at facebook.com/Conduit News. And you can also head on over to the brand new conduitnews.com. There is a brand new story up about the tax task force, and they're approving their recommendation as to what needs to happen going forward. It's an excellent analysis and breakdown if you really want to know specific taxes and what they are, what they're actually doing. We're going to go over that, I'm sure, a little later in the program. We got a great show for you. Coming up at 7:33, we are really, really thrilled to have back on the program Dr. Michael Busler. I want to talk just a little bit with him, about a bunch of things. I want to talk about a little bit more about trade, tariffs, and that sort of thing. But I also want to talk to him about fuel index taxing. I know that doesn't sound exactly, the most sexy thing to talk about, but I just want to talk about how, there is some talk about moving to that instead of doing, certain amount of cents per gallon. Instead, you allow the fuel tax to rise with inflation, and it kind of essentially means that you're going to give the government a stable source of growing revenue, like a guarantee of revenue growth, which I don't know if I'm entirely comfortable with, but we'll be talking with Dr. Michael Busler about that. He's a professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. We had him on last week, and it was really, really just delightful. So we've got that as well as article here about Senator Tom Cotton, how he touts the law on foreign investments. This is a big deal. Going to be more oversight in when it comes to foreign investments in the United States. Of course, alarm bells are going off about China, and I'm going to tell you more about that here in just a second. But I want to start, and I'm going to mention this again at 7 o'clock, but I want to start with a correction that I need to make. And it's actually, when it rains, it pours, folks. There's actually two corrections that I need to make. But let me start with what I think the biggest one is. So at 7 o'clock yesterday, I brought you a story that was in the Arkansas Democrat Gazette. It was by Doug Thompson. The headline was, "Official, Governor went against advice, signed bill geared towards one Arkansas college." Okay? Now, this has to do with former budget director Brandon Sharp, and it was a story by Doug Thompson where he essentially is saying that Brandon Sharp is saying, look, I tried to get them to not sign this Act 417 of 2015 that allowed money from the state's General Improvement Fund to essentially go to Ecclesia College. Now, we did talk a lot about an old Conduit article, that did suggest that the governor seemed to know, what John Woods was up to based on the trial, stuff that came out in the trial with Senator John Woods, the text messages, things like that, when Senator Woods was trying to do the same thing that they did in 2015 with medical marijuana, trying to fund a Christian college, portions of the tax dollars and everything else. But I did come to a conclusion or I was speculating, pontificating, but I'm pretty sure that I'm wrong. I know that I'm wrong based on an older story that I didn't see. And so I made a mistake. I made an error, and the error is this. When this story came out on Sunday by Doug Thompson, Michael Wickline tweeted out an older article that I didn't see back on May 29th of 2015. And this particular article gives a lot more insight into the real reason why Brandon Sharp was fired. The headline here, State Budget Chief fired after women complained. And so in this particular case, Michael Wickline says that the state's new chief fiscal officer back in 2015 fired the state budget administrator Brandon Sharp after complaints about him from other state employees nearly a year after Sharp was warned that his job was in jeopardy. Okay, so this is a little different than what was reported in the story from Sunday. It's reported that there was an employee that said that Brandon Sharp was rubbing her shoulders with alcohol on his breath, according to a letter that was written in a formal complaint. And so I do think that that is certainly relevant information when it comes to ascertaining the credibility of what this former employee is saying now. Now, you can draw your own conclusions, but I certainly, what I had said was, hey, it looks like you tell somebody not to sign a bill because you're worried about it, violating the Constitution, and you get fired because of it. Well, clearly, I guess you could maybe say that could have been part of the equation, maybe, but, if you're rubbing a girl's shoulders with alcohol in your breath and you say, according to the report, if you tell anybody about this, I'll fire you, according to Michael Wickline, I certainly think that adds more depth to the story. So I wish I would have brought that to your attention when I reported on it yesterday. So I just wanted to make that clear. The phone number is 870-275-9799. At the top, let's talk about this. This is huge news, huge national news. The Daily Caller is reporting that China hacked Hillary Clinton's private email server. This is Richard Pollack over at the Daily Caller. This is big news. A Chinese-owned company penetrated former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's private server, according to sources briefed on the matter. What's a Chinese-owned company? So it's not really the Chinese government, right? Wrong. The company inserted code that forwarded copies of Clinton's emails to the Chinese company in real time. The Intelligence Community Inspector General warned of the problem, but the FBI subsequently failed to act. Texas Republican Representative Louis Gohmert said during a July hearing. This is a pretty big story. You remember? Now, I know it's different. I know they want to draw a dividing line between Hillary Clinton's illegal email server that she kept in her bathroom versus the DNC hack of emails, right? Or the DNC, let's say the DNC losing their emails, right? But I remember this. When I saw this story this morning, I remembered President Donald Trump. Can you cue this YouTube video up, Joe? I remember President Donald Trump in one of the debates where he said this. Go ahead. Listen to this.
I don't think anybody knows it was Russia that broke into the DNC. She's saying Russia, 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 but maybe it was. It could be Russia, but it could also be China. It could also be lots of other people. It also could be somebody sitting on their bed that weighs 400 pounds, okay?
Stop.
You don't know who broke in.
That has always resonated with me. It has always resonated with me because he said that multiple times during their debates, that it could be China. He was always pretty consistent, I think, to bring up, listen, Russia's not the only one with people, at their computers trying to hack into, anything that's associated or affiliated with the United States of America. He was very consistent about that. So if this is true, they have always kind of put out there, listen, it's pretty obvious with Hillary Clinton and her private email server that, yeah, she was hacked by foreign governments. But the fact that it's China, I think, really changes things. Listen to this. The Daily Caller, the Intelligence Community Inspector General found that virtually all of Clinton's emails were sent to a foreign entity. Representative Louis Gohmert, a Texas Republican, said at a July 12th House Committee on the Judiciary hearing he did not reveal the entity's identity, but said it was unrelated to Russia. Two officials with the ICIG, Inspector Frank Rucker and attorney Janet McMillan, met repeatedly with FBI officials to warn them of the Chinese intrusion, according to a former intelligence officer with expertise in cybersecurity issues who was briefed on the matter. He spoke anonymously as he was not authorized to publicly address the Chinese's role with Clinton's server. Among those FBI officials was Peter Strzok, who was the Bureau's top counterintelligence official. Strzok was fired last month following the discovery he sent anti-Trump texts to his mistress and co-worker Lisa Page. Strzok didn't act on the information the ICIG provided him, according to Gohmert. Gohmert mentioned in the Judiciary Committee hearing the ICIG officials told Strzok and three other top FBI officials that they found an anomaly on Clinton's server. The former intelligence officer, spoke with the Daily Caller News Foundation, said that the ICIG discovered the anomaly pretty early in 2015. All right, so what did Peter Strzok have to say about this? Go over to the Zero Hedge article here, because they're reporting on what the Daily Caller is reporting, but they add a little bit more substance. If you scroll down there, click that YouTube video. This is just the beginning of the exchange, where Peter Strzok essentially says, I don't even remember meeting this guy, Rucker. I don't remember meeting him. Go ahead.
You said earlier in this hearing you were concerned about a hostile foreign power affecting our election. Do you recall the Intelligence Community Inspector General, Chuck McCulloch, having an investigation into an anomaly found on Hillary Clinton's emails?
I do not.
Well, let me refresh your recollection. The Intelligence Community Inspector General, Chuck McCulloch, sent his investigator, Frank Rucker, along with an ICIG attorney, Jeanette McMillan, to brief you and Dean Chappelle and two other FBI personnel that I won't name at this time about an anomaly they had found on Hillary Clinton's emails that were going to and from the private unauthorized server that you were supposed to be investigating. Now, do you remember it?
I remember meeting Mr. Rucker on either one or two occasions. I do not remember the specific content or discussions.
Well, I'll help you with that too then. Mr. Rucker reported to those of you, the four of you there, in the presence of the ICIG attorney, that they had found this anomaly on Hillary Clinton's emails going through her private server. And when they had done the forensic analysis, they found that her emails, every single one except for four, over 30,000 of them, were going to an address that was not on the distribution list. It was a compartmentalized bit of information that was sending it to an unauthorized source. Do you recall that?
Sir, I don't.
Well, he went on to explain it. And
incompetence.
You didn't say anything.
No.
You thanked him. You shook his hand. But the problem was that it was going to an unauthorized source that was a foreign entity unrelated to Russia. And from what you've said here, you did nothing more than nod and shake the man's hand when you didn't seem to be all that concerned about our national integrity of our election when it was involving Hillary Clinton.
Stop.
So,
all right, that's Louis Gohmert. That was back in July. The foreign entity, according to the Daily Caller, the news today, that foreign entity that he's referencing back in July, the Daily Caller reporting that it is China that hacked Clinton's private email server, that unknown address was going to a Chinese-owned company and obviously into the hands of the communist Chinese government. Huge developments here. But what about Russia, right? What about Russia? Scrolling down here, and by the way, if that doesn't just kind of burn you up, the fact that this was the guy, Peter Strzok, he was the guy investigating Hillary Clinton, supposedly, but we all know it wasn't an actual investigation. He doesn't remember. I don't remember the guy telling me that China has all of Hillary's emails. I don't remember that at all. What an embarrassment this is. I mean, it really is. Now, scrolling down here, can you keep going here? We have some tweets. Remember when we, even if the information isn't marked properly when it's disseminated, it's still classified. Scrolling down, I saw another one I wanted to get to. Listen to this. 30,000 plus Hillary Clinton emails were sent to an unauthorized foreign entity, not Russia hacking. Obama was one of 13 individuals who sent at least 100 emails to Hillary Clinton on the private server. At least 100 Obama emails are in the hands of a foreign entity. Where's the outrage? Yeah, that's exactly right. You will hear crickets from the mainstream media. You will not hear anything, I predict, anything about this story anywhere in the mainstream media. Yet this morning when I woke up, it was obvious to me that this is a huge, huge new development about China. Now, the Arkansas angle is still the same. Why in the world would Arkansas want to do business with communist Chinese countries? Why would we want to give our Arkansas taxpayer dollars to communist Chinese countries when they're hacking in to the Secretary of State and her secret email server? Now, I mean, obviously that's on Hillary, but why would we want to do business? Why do we assume, oh, no, it's just a Chinese company? Let's not be naive. If it's a Chinese company, then they represent the communist Chinese government. They are here stealing $600 billion a year of our intellectual property, and while they're here, why not? Let's go ahead and get some of Obama's emails that are sending to Hillary and everything else. I mean, a giant compromise of national security. This whole thing is projection and deflection. Let's try to make Trump out to be this bad guy. He's really a Russian agent. When in reality, it is the other side that has put the national security of this country at risk, sharing our secrets and emails and communications with the communist Chinese government. No wonder they feel emboldened to advance in the South China Sea. No wonder they feel like this. I mean, if they're able to read our communications between one another, we got to take a break. It's big news this morning. Tell me what you think about it. Sound off on Facebook, facebook.com/Conduit News. Back in a moment.
Bigger lobbyist is now heading the opposition against this term limit bill. It's a fallacy to think that bureaucrats or lobbyists ever support strict term limits. They gain their power by attaching themselves to long-term incumbents. If we want a citizen legislature, not career politicians, we need to vote for issue 3.
Let me ask you this, because you just said something that I've never actually thought about before. You said lobbyists, but let's talk about the bureaucrats. You think that's true with bureaucrats? Sure. That bureaucrats gain their power by forging relationships with those in power, similar to lobbyists?
Of course I do. Yeah.
Wow.
And one of the proof's in the pudding. Never has any bureaucratic organization ever been on the side of strict term limits. Look at the 2004 campaign. Look where the state employees union came down.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that.
If they support us, why?
I never meant to go into politics. It wasn't my intention when I was young. But I was raised to believe you had to pay your way for the blessings bestowed on you. I was happy with my career in the entertainment world, but I ultimately went into politics because I wanted to protect something precious. Ours was the first revolution in the history of mankind that truly reversed the course of government. And with 3 little words: we the people. We the people tell the government what to do. It doesn't tell us. We the people are the driver. The government is the car. And we decide where it should go and by what route and how fast. Almost all the world's constitutions are documents in which governments tell the people what their privileges are. Our Constitution is a document in which we, the people, tell the government what it is allowed to do. We, the people, are free.
All right. 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799 is the telephone number. Really interesting stuff here today. Still no. Let me just check some of these others. I mean, I haven't even seen this up on Breitbart. Just seen it at the Daily Caller. Zero Hedge. Yeah, the biggest thing right now over on Drudge this morning is that Lanny Davis has blown it and actually has exposed famous Watergate reporter. Really hurt the credibility of Carl Bernstein. This is another huge story this morning. I don't think it's as big as the Hillary Clinton. Her emails are now, according to the Daily Caller, they were hacked by China. Which makes things a little bit different, doesn't it? But this story about Lanny Davis is fascinating to me. I mean, it's as if, CNN doesn't need it. They don't need any more questions about their credibility. I mean, everybody's made up their mind, right? You either, at this point, CNN is so bad. I mean, if you are still trusting CNN as a news source, then I don't think there's anything CNN can do to get you to not trust them. But, I mean, we've all made up our minds. I mean, the fake news is the fake news. But, I mean, you do have to point this out. There's still a lot of people that still think CNN is telling them the truth. Breitbart.com, another very fake news scandal engulfs CNN with fake Michael Cohen Russia story. Okay, so just so you know, right now, as we speak, as, Conduit News, we are starting off the morning. You're starting off the morning with us. This is the real news, the real narrative today. The snapshot of today, okay, is that CNN for about a month has been pushing a fake story that Michael Cohen is willing to testify or has new information or evidence that Donald Trump knew about the Russia meeting. I think they might have even said he was present there, but they have been pushing this. And this story, based on an anonymous source, we now know that the anonymous source was Lanny Davis. And Lanny Davis, this is Michael Cohen's attorney, former Clinton attorney, or, whatever, connected to the Clintons. We now know that Lanny has backed off that and says, no, Michael doesn't have any new information. Then we have other reports from Axios last week that say that Michael Cohen testified before congressional committees, closed-door congressional committees, that he doesn't have that information. So CNN still stands by their story, even though it is now on, and it was on air. I mean, Lanny Davis did an interview on air with CNN admitting all of this. They have pushed this fake story for basically a month, and now it's all falling to pieces, and it was all an attempt to what? Drum up a fake story about Russia and trying to make Donald Trump a Russian agent. At the same time, we have the story that Hillary Clinton's email server was hacked by a foreign government. We now know today, according to the Daily Caller, if they're correct, that foreign government is China. Wow, what a snapshot of truth versus lies, of truth versus fake news. And that's only in the first 30 minutes of the show, folks. We got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
Would they always give money to our opposition? And legislators know this. they might say that see, lobbyists and bureaucrats have a different job, and they're both needed, but they don't need to be kingmakers. They need to give information to legislators so legislators can make a good decision when representing their constituents. But they don't need to be kingmakers, and they don't need to ensure a political career. Term limits is a great, healthy, reasonable way to bring legislators back to a more representative nature. We want them to represent the people in their district, not lobbyists and not bureaucrats.
You know, we're talking with Tim Jacob. He's a term limits advocate. He's instrumental in getting this thing on the ballot. That is issue 3. I think it's interesting that it's issue 3 on the ballot, and John Woods, lied to the people with his own issue 3. So that's fascinating. In 10 years, I feel like is a long enough time, and I know I'm not a legislator, and that's one of the criticisms. Well, you don't know, you haven't been down there. I will say what has been interesting about the debate that's being had is when the other side comes and they say that the argument of 10 years isn't long enough to get a handle on things. Is that not a rebuke of just how dysfunctional the situation is and how our representatives really aren't representing us if the government is so bad and so big that over a 10-year period you can't get anything done, you can't reform, you can't do what the people sent you down there to do?
Well, and I think a lot of progress happens in your freshman term, just because then you're coming with fresh ideas. You're representing your constituents more at that time. The folks that say 10 years isn't long enough, do they believe in the presidential term limit? Certainly the president has more to learn. Certainly the president has more responsibilities, and we're limiting the president to 8 years. Mm-hmm. Every statewide office except a legislator has a lower limit. It's 8 years for auditor, for lieutenant governor, for governor. And legislators under this amendment will get 10 years. I would say that they need to hit the ground running, do the best they can, but allow the voters to decide how long the term limit is. That shouldn't be done with lobbyists and legislators in a closed-door meeting. That shouldn't be done with a campaign of silence where the voters aren't even informed that it's on the ballot. What happened in 2014 cannot stand. We're going to have a choice between an amendment that was written by a convicted felon or an amendment that the voters, in most part, have already approved into landslide.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
This fake news story, I want you to listen to this real quick. We got to move on here at some point, but Matthew Boyle at Breitbart. Another very fake news scandal has engulfed CNN as the network's credibility crisis reaches another fever pitch just over a year after 3 senior network staffers were forced to resign in disgrace over a similar scandal. But they're not applying that same standard here because we're talking about Watergate-famed Carl Bernstein. This time, though, famed Watergate reporter Carl Bernstein is at the center of the scandal. The network for now is dug in despite deep criticism from across the political spectrum. So what you see right here is a Breitbart article, right? It's a right-leaning news publication. You also have the Daily Caller with a story on this. But it's also the Associated Press that has exposed this, the Washington Post, even BuzzFeed is now talking about how Lanny Davis and CNN have botched up have actually weakened the case against Donald Trump and Russia collusion and him being a KGB agent. Back on July 27th, so it has been basically a month, CNN's Bernstein shared a byline with former Barack Obama administration official and chief CNN national security correspondent Jim Scudo, along with CNN researcher and producer Marshall Cohen. The headline, quote, Cohen claims Trump knew in advance of 2016 Trump Tower meeting. Now that story, again, they have been pushing for a month, Carl Bernstein, it cites an anonymous source. We find out that the anonymous source now is Lanny Davis, and Lanny Davis says he shouldn't have been cute, and what he said essentially was not true. That he said that Cohen has evidence that Trump knew in advance. Now Lanny Davis says I never said that, and Lanny Davis is saying he's the anonymous source. It is really textbook. If you were going to teach somebody what not to do as a journalist, this would be it. This would be it. In the second paragraph of the CNN piece, the famed Watergate reporter, along with former Obama official and CNN researcher, wrote about the stakes. Cohen's claim would contradict repeated denials by Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and their lawyers and other administration officials who have said that the president knew nothing about the Trump Tower meeting until he was approached by it by the New York Times in July 2017. Then the third paragraph, Cohen alleges that he was present, along with several others, when Trump was informed of the Russians' offer by Trump Jr. By Cohen's account, Trump approved going ahead with the meeting with the Russians, according to sources. Who is that source? It was one source. We now know. It was Lanny Davis. Lanny Davis says it's not true now. I mean, can you get any worse than this? Scrolling down, focusing back on the matter at hand, CNN's Bernstein, Scudo, and Cohen had what would have been a major story if true. That not only was Michael Cohen turning on Trump on those payments to McDougal and Daniels, but that Cohen was willing and going to testify against the president. But it's all fake, and yet they're standing by their reporting. I mean, if you read the rest of this article, you have CNN spokeswoman claiming, quote, we stand by our story and we are confident in our reporting of it, even though it is now being uniformly criticized by the Washington Post and the likes of BuzzFeed. They're still standing by it. Later on in this particular story at Breitbart, they say the reason they're standing by it is because of Carl Bernstein. They're handling it differently than they would other stories that if they were caught in another, it would be easy to sacrifice. But because it's Carl Bernstein, and you know what, the media is obsessed with. I mean, everybody's been obsessed with Watergate. Let's be honest, right? You always put gate after everything if it's a scandal, right? So that's true. But they so want to compare Donald Trump to Richard Nixon. I mean, they cannot stand it. They have to constantly. And so, Bernstein gives them that ability to constantly remind everybody, the Republican, there's been a Republican president before, and he resigned. Maybe we can get Trump to resign. I mean, that's what they want. This whole thing, the media, the mainstream media, throughout the entire Trump presidency of 18 months, they're trying to remove him from office. That's all they care about. We have to remove him from office. In the meantime, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, jumped to record highs as the United States and Mexico strike a trade deal. That's right, folks. The NASDAQ hit 8,000 for the first time yesterday. There were, if you go listen to the tapes, there were applause. There was applause, on the floor of the stock exchange as everything was doing so well. This is just a CNBC article. Stocks jumped on Monday as the United States and Mexico closed a new trade deal. Then you can have, let's see here. Go to the Zero Hedge article, Joe, because I don't have that up here. Yeah, listen to this. This is a really good. They left Canada out. Trump announces U.S.-Mexico trade agreement as he terminates NAFTA. Canada left out. I heard the fake news mainstream media say, well, NAFTA's still alive and well. He really didn't terminate NAFTA, in Canada and everything else. No, this is, when are they going to learn? I mean, I've learned by now. I'm not saying Donald Trump can't make a mistake in negotiation. Everybody can make a mistake in negotiations, but he seems to be handling this country the way a businessman would handle. You've got to get people to the table. And in order to get them to the table, you got to strengthen your position sometimes. In a hastily arranged Oval Office conference with the Mexican president, joining by speakerphone, Trump announced that he is terminating NAFTA as it is now and entering a different deal with Mexico and possibly Canada if they want to negotiate fairly. If not, Trump will slam tariffs on Canada's cars. Scrolling down here. During the conference, Trump said that they used to call it NAFTA, but we're going to call it the United States-Mexico Trade Agreement. We'll get rid of the name NAFTA. So it's the USMTA. What would you do? USMTA. USMTA. Okay, keep going here. We got a few tweets, people talking about speakerphones and stuff. A key provision of the New Deal is an increase in the mandated locally sourced auto content. And instead of 62.5%, it's going up to 75%. And that 40% to 45% of auto content would be made by workers earning an average base wage of $16 an hour. According to the U.S. Trade Rep, the new rules will incentivize billions annually in additional U.S. vehicle and auto parts production and help preserve and reshore industry jobs and investment. The deal also maintains duty-free access in farm products, while the countries have also agreed to stronger rules of origin for industrial products such as chemicals, steel-intensive products, glass, and optical fiber. Now, I read an article yesterday saying that this blindsided Canada. They didn't really expect, it's not that they didn't expect the USA to attempt to make a deal with Mexico, but I think they were counting on Mexico kind of relaying the negotiation process back to Canada to kind of, so they're not in direct talks with the U.S., but Canada's going to kind of clue them in a little bit. But the Mexican president here saying that he hopes Canada would soon be incorporated in the revised agreement. While Trump said that remains to be seen, as he announced the move, Trump said he would drop the name NAFTA for the trade arrangement because of the bad connotations of a deal that has been criticized as contributing to the flow of jobs from the United States to Mexico. So there we go. Now the question is this. Does this mean, I haven't heard anybody say this, but if we're going to have billions more, if this is true, and raising the threshold of how much, in order to avoid tariffs, you have to have so much of your car, some percentage of your car made in the U.S., things like that. If that is true, my question is this. If that does mean that there's going to be billions more coming into the country every year because of the trade deal, does that mean Mexico is paying for the wall? It's just a question. Would that then mean Mexico is paying for the wall? I mean, come on, we're talking about shifting production, right? We're talking about shifting production. Can't be done in Mexico, got to be done here. If you're shifting production, would that not mean that Mexico is paying for the wall? Just an honest question I think everybody would like an answer to. All right, folks, let me know what you think. 870-275-9799. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about small business. Let's talk about small business in the context of Arkansas small business, shall we? You've often heard it said that the government can operate in a way that you can't run your household, you can't run a small business. None of us can run a small business or our own household the way the government runs its household. Now, ideally, we think that it should run the same, right? Because that makes sense. Then it's more of a, you take ownership. You're not spending somebody else's money because you have actual skin in the game. And a lot of times these politicians don't have skin in the game. That's why they spend our money as if it's, I mean, you know, they spend it like it's somebody else's money. They don't care. Well, because it is somebody else's money. Well, let's talk about the way budgeting is done. Let's talk about small business in terms of, you know, the way a small business budgets, ideally, is the way the government should budget. I mean, I just got through telling you that it appears to me, and we've had guests on to confirm this, that Donald Trump appears to be approaching these situations as a business guy. That's why he's getting such, you know, so, I mean, the results are rapid results, right? This Conduit for Action article from a couple of days ago talks about Arkansas budgeting and the problems with Arkansas budgeting. High spending and lack of accountability. Could you run your business with high spending and lack of accountability? Certainly, the lack of accountability is a problem. Arkansas's budget process is designed for growth in government spending, which makes Arkansas a high-tax state, a high-spending state. It has also, I would add, makes us a poorer state. The process fails to eliminate or reduce the least effective, least needed, and most wasteful state government programs. For decades, the Democrats controlled Arkansas state government. Their idea of control was to grow government, spend more, and never look back. Every 2 years, the legislature passes some tax relief legislation and brags about it, but we will remain a high-tax state and a high-spending state as long as the state spends money just because it spent the money in the past. Now, as a business owner, do you do that? Do you do that as a business owner? There are times that you have, okay, you're a business owner and you need a new piece of equipment. Well, because you bought a new piece of equipment last year, does that mean that you must buy a new piece of equipment next year? No, not if you don't need it. Well, the government would say, oh, whether we need it or not, we spent it last year, we have to spend it again this year. It doesn't make any sense. Here's the fatal flaw in the Democrats' Arkansas budget plan, which the Republicans inherited. The starting place for next year's budget begins with them determining how much money the agency got in the previous year and then asks two questions. What percentage budget increase should all agencies get for next year? Should the agency get extra money in addition to across-the-board increase? Those two questions. Now, that's crazy. No one would ever run your small business that way. No one would ever run your household that way. But that's how the government runs it. And we need it to change. Here's what the plan doesn't ask when Arkansas decides to attempt to budget. Do we need this specific program anymore? They don't ask that question. Oh, you can't. That's a terrifying question to bureaucrats. Do we need you anymore? Let me ask you something, Peter. What is it exactly that you do here? Actually, I don't think that wasn't Peter. I'm talking about the movie Office Space. If you've never seen it, it's a classic. Office Space. That's a great movie. What exactly is it that you do here? I take the software to the customer. I'm a people person. Is the program meeting its goals? Can't ask that question. Don't try to judge us, the bureaucracy says. Again, what would you do if your employee didn't want to, have to answer to meeting the goals? Number 3, is there a better way to do what we're doing now? You can't ask that in government. That's too, that's too extreme. That's too disruptive. Number 4, is the agency wasting money and needs to tighten its belt so it will not spend money unwisely? They don't ask those questions when we budget in Arkansas. Enter the Republicans. You see, in 2013, the Republican Party became the majority party down in Little Rock. But there was a strong Democrat governor. When the new Republicans were sworn in, many of the budget decisions had already been made, and the budget process didn't change. Since 2015, Republicans have had a large majority in the legislature, and the state has a Republican governor. Still, the same system of budgeting continues unchanged from the Democrat days. Despite the Republican principles of limited government and lower taxes, the Republicans have continued the Democrats' system of budgeting. The Republicans have tried to hold down the across-the-board increase for agencies, but this still rewards bad, wasteful programs because no evaluation is done and the problem is not addressed. Some Republicans campaign on running Arkansas government like a business. But do you know of any business that blindly increases what it spends on every division of its operation? No. A successful business will evaluate what it needs to spend on each division and decide where changes in operation are needed. This is what must be done in state government. Just because it's taxpayer money, not your own money, is no reason to let millions be flushed down the toilet. But it's always been done that way. Republicans have fallen into a trap of doing bad budgeting because that's the way it's always been done. Budget hearings will start in October and will be the same old Democrat budget process because no agency evaluations have been done. Let me just stop here and add something. When you don't fess up to your shortfalls and you just throw rocks at those who are pointing out your shortfalls and you ignore your shortfalls, when you do these things, you start to lose credibility on a host of other issues. You can actually see that play out a lot. I'm going to talk more about that tomorrow on the program, but there's a big story right now going on nationally and internationally with the Catholic Church. I know you guys have heard it. You know, it's really sad. I'm 34 years old. There has never been a time in my lifetime where the Catholic Church has been in the headlines and you not know what it's going to be about. And it's not good. It's not a good thing, right? Is there a time that you remember when the Catholic Church was in big headlines and you not know? Well, here's the point, and we've made this point before, but I think it's good for any organization to learn, and I'm going to have more detail about this tomorrow, but any organization to learn this. Ireland, okay, when you think of Catholicism, a lot of people think of Ireland. Ireland just passed abortion, or they basically repealed a law that made abortion illegal, and now they have abortion in Ireland, and there was this huge groundswell, and all of the articles, you know what it said? It said, Catholic Church dismissed, we voted for abortion anyway. Does anybody think that when you fall short of the standards that you set for yourself repeatedly and you don't own up to it, and that's the key, is to not owning up to it, that maybe you lose credibility in other areas and eventually people will just ignore you? This is a danger of any organization that doesn't have some sort of self-reflection, that doesn't have some sort of way to correct itself, when inevitably it's going to go astray, because anybody who has standards is a hypocrite. And any organization is going to purport to be one thing, and there's going to be shortfalls, and there's going to be mistakes made. I mean, my goodness, I made a correction this last hour, and I'm happy to do it because we want to get things right. We want to get the reporting that we do right, okay? So you have to have that self-reflection. And the danger is that when you fall short of the standards that you set for yourself as an organization, as a party, as the Catholic Church has, obviously, that if you don't fess up to it, if you don't attempt to, if you're just trying to protect your friends and buddies and your power, that eventually nobody's going to listen to you on anything. And that is something to seriously think about. And I'm actually going to have more on that, specifically with what's going on with the Catholic Church and the cover-ups, because it is a huge story, and it needs to be talked about. I'll have more on that tomorrow on the program. We're up against a break. I got to go. Back in just a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government, and the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Elections. That's the choice in November.
Yeah. And you know what? When you put it in those terms, I mean, how do you not vote for this thing? And look, I think this thing is going to pass because of what the people have done in the past, because of the will of the voters. It's an honest ballot title. It says what it is. It says what it's going to do. It has the word term limit in the ballot title, which the other ones you had to read in it was an ethics amendment and that sort of thing. It was extremely deceptive. Now, I do want to talk about the opposition to this, Tim, because you do have the Chamber of Commerce. We were just talking about this. The Chamber of Commerce CEO Randy Zook has formed a ballot committee to oppose Issue 3. Do you think there's going to be a lawsuit? I mean, it says right here that the purpose is to advocate for the disqualification or defeat. Do you think they're going to use the courts to try to disqualify the term limits amendment?
Of course they will, because any group...
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, so when it rains, it pours. Speaking of corrections, yesterday on the show, I made a mistake. We were going over the Bob Ballinger audio and how outrageous it was that he was saying, nobody in Little Rock is down there benefiting. And of course, everybody laughs and boos and hisses. Well, when I was talking about him, and I think I've done this more than once, and I apologize, I called Bob Ballinger, State Representative Ballinger, the senator-elect of District 5. He is not. He actually has 2 opponents this November. So let me correct that. He's got Lee Evans. He's facing Lee Evans, the Libertarian candidate, and he's also facing a Democrat named Jim Wallace. So I want to make sure I make that correction loud and clear. Bob Ballinger's not the senator-elect. He has a Libertarian and a Democrat opponent in the upcoming November election. And anyway, so we've got one more hour coming your way next. Really excited to talk to our guest that we had on last week again, Dr. Michael Busler, and also going to talk a little bit about foreign investment when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
The news and
Talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
With folks that is deceptive enough to put this on the ballot without a debate, with campaign of silence, does not want this to go to the Arkansas voters. So I predict that they will try to sue to take this away from the voters so that the voters cannot make a decision on this. This whole issue has been a deception on the part of the legislature, on the part of the lobbyists, and we need to say no to it. But we are going to have to fight this in court because they cannot stand for this to get to the ballot.
I mean, it's gonna severely, I think, curtail, the power structure down there. It's going to change things in a big way, and they certainly don't want that. I'm curious as to what their arguments are going to be, though, because it's not as if there are multiple issues. It's in one ballot, that could get it or in one initiative that could get it disqualified, but that's not here. It's very simple. I'm just curious what they may do to get this thing, up to the Supreme Court or something like that. And I'm like you, we always hear from legislators who want to raise taxes, but they don't want to go on record for raising taxes. They'll say, well, I didn't vote to raise taxes. I just voted to put it on the ballot to let the people decide. The people need to decide this. It's the people. Well, you know what? That's the same thing here, right? Let's use that same argument. Let the people decide. What do you want? You want 16 years or possibly 22 years if you get, play your cards right, or do you want the 10-year term limits? Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I just think that's right, and I think the people need to decide. We wouldn't be here at this point today if they had been honest with their ballot title and let the people decide in 2014. They are the ones that decided to hide this legislation on page 16 of an unrelated amendment. In the same amendment, they also tripled their pay. They didn't want voters to have a decision on that either because they did not announce that. They did not publicize it. This has been a travesty of legislation. And it's time that we look to the voters to make this decision and not to the legislators. And it's interesting that they will always, and I've heard this constantly, well, lobbyists are going to be empowered. Well, does the Chamber of Commerce not know that? Because the Chamber of Commerce is our opposition. Every lobbyist will be our opposition here. I wish they'd stop saying something that they know is false. Lobbyists hate term limits. That's the truth.
Yeah, they have to if you got a new legislator, you have to reforge that relationship. I imagine that's more expensive on the front end.
Well, it is, and they do have to work harder. They have to explain their issues to legislators, and they have to try to convince them on the merits of their issue. They cannot promise a political career, and that takes an arrow out of the quiver of lobbyists.
Wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
It's really important that we determine who is going to make the rules of term limits in the state of Arkansas. Are we going to let the voters do it, or are we going to let lobbyists and legislators do it?
Tim,
that's our choice in November. And I encourage everyone to stand up for our rights. The people rule. That's the motto of our state. Let's make sure that the people rule in November and not legislators and lobbyists with a campaign of silence and deception. It's very important that we make this stand and give a loud voice to term limits in our state.
Tim Jacob, I want you to go ahead and give the website if people want more information, want to support you guys. I mean, I understand if there's going to be a lawsuit, which we probably think there is, that's going to cost money to defend, correct?
That is true, and the powerful are going to have the deep pocket. It's the people versus the powerful on this issue, but our website is arkansastermlimits.org. I encourage you to go to it, get some information from it. Please help fund us. We need that funding desperately. We are going up against the most powerful people in our state. We're going up against the most powerful legislators in our state. This is a
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. The phone number 870-275-9799. Made a detailed correction from yesterday's program, but I want to make sure I do it twice in a day. I mean, some people may not listen to the full 2 hours. They may listen to 1 hour or the other hour. But I did tell you yesterday about this Doug Thompson piece. We led, matter of fact, 24 hours ago, we were starting with this piece. Official governor went against advice, signed bill geared towards one Arkansas college, talking about Ecclesia College. Talks about this former official, Brandon Sharp. Now, this led me to conclude, hey, look, it looks like Brandon Sharp, this was a speculation, but I said, looks like Brandon Sharp, and I even said this is what the headline should read. And I was wrong. I said, looks like Brandon Sharp told him not to sign a bill that was going to fund Ecclesia College, and then he was fired for it, okay? I didn't see a previous piece back in 2015. I should have. Michael Wickline actually tweeted this out right after the Doug Thompson piece broke around Sunday, but I missed it and I didn't see it. It's a 2015 piece that tells you why or gives you more information as to what led to the firing of Brandon Sharp. The state budget chief was fired after a woman complained about him. And it talks about there was a complaint written that he was terminated. He was considered to be on probation. There were complaints from other staff members. Michael Wickline reported that records released by the Finance Department back in 2015 included 4 letters from other workers regarding Sharp's dealings with female employees. One employee, whose name is redacted, wrote in an undated letter that Sharp came to where she was sitting in the office and started rubbing her shoulders with the remark that, quote, if you tell anybody about this, I will fire you. In the letter, she also suggested that Sharp had alcohol in his system, and the time was 12:45 in the afternoon. The letter doesn't specify the day. So this is clearly a story that would provide a lot more context, not only into the situation with Ecclesia and Doug Thompson's report, but really just the credibility of the former employee and what he is saying. Did he really have the conversation that he says he had with Michael Amaro, and Duncan Baird? Maybe he did. But it also goes to the the motivations and everything else. So that is a more complete picture of the story. I should have presented that when I was covering this yesterday. I didn't, and I just want to make sure that you guys have all the facts. And when I make a mistake like this, and I'm sure I will again, and I have in the past, I do want to try to correct it so that you guys have as much of the facts as you can on this. We'll continue to follow this story. If there's any more developments about this particular act of Ecclesia College and everything else, and funding it through the it was a John Woods scheme for sure. I mean, we know that. All of that is still true. Convicted felon John Woods, putting all of the government money, basically making Ecclesia College a private Christian school a de facto publicly funded university, but still private. That's what the whole thing was, and the kickbacks and the money laundering and everything else. So we'll continue to follow the story as things develop. So our whiteboard today says waiting for justice. This is our new whiteboard for today and the rest of the week, waiting for justice. I'm reminded of a play, is it by Samuel Beckett, called Waiting for Godot? I hate the play. Can't stand the play. I think it's terrible. Always, I just can't stand it. But anyway, when I was writing this whiteboard yesterday, Waiting for Justice, I was like, gosh, I can't stand Waiting for Godot. Can't stand that play. I don't know if it's Samuel Beckett or not. Joe, who wrote Waiting for Godot? Will you just look it up for me real quick? I don't want to have to make another correction. But anyway, Samuel Beckett. Okay, so Waiting for Justice. What does this mean, waiting for justice? Well, I've been trying to, and I'm going to continue to, encourage our U.S. justice system, the U.S. attorneys, to help restore the confidence that many Arkansans have lost in their government and their government officials. I got a phone call, or I got a communication, I guess I would say, from somebody in Little Rock yesterday. And they said that Senator Jeremy Hutchinson was at the Capitol. He was attending committee meetings. These committee meetings all week are focused on reducing burdensome and onerous regulations and rules. And Senator Jeremy Hutchinson was there. Of course, Senator Hutchinson is accused in a guilty plea. Rusty Cranford, he hasn't been charged, but Rusty Cranford, the linchpin in all of these inner workings, he took a plea, and he said that he bribed, basically, Jeremy Hutchinson over a course of many years, $500,000 to basically pass laws and legislation for preferred family health care. This is what is alleged in federal court documents out of the Western District of the state of Missouri. And, there's been a lot of things happen. You've had, since then, Jeremy Hutchinson's law partners distance themselves from him, saying he's got to focus on the issues that he clearly has. So when he walked into the Capitol yesterday, I think a lot of people noticed. Okay, a lot of people noticed, and it was reported that he had a smile on his face, and so we will see. I don't know what that means. We could read into a thousand things, but you have the guilty plea of Joe Walsh from Southern Arkansas Youth Services. You have the allegation that he was also paying what appears to be the president pro temp, former Governor's Chief of Staff Michael Lamoureux. He was a senator, back when all of this stuff was going on. You have multiple senators implicated. You have former legislators that have pled guilty to this. You have other legislators who have been mentioned, and there's nothing that has happened with this. Now, it is interesting that you do have reports last week that the government, you have members, was it of the Attorney General staff? I think the Deputy Attorney General of Arkansas saying we expect more arrests because charges, I guess, because you had charges last week with Medicaid, former Medicaid or government DHS employee. Sorry, I'm getting confused. It's a tangled web. It's a tangled web here. The people are waiting for justice, though, and that's what that's just what it's really kind of weighing on me, because I'm thinking to myself, there is such a thing as legal graft, and there's also such a thing as getting away with it, doing things that are unethical, getting away with it. But sometimes there's also such a thing as mistaken legal graft, meaning politicians think that know what they're doing is unethical, but they believe it to be legal, and they're wrong, that it's actually illegal. That the little state loophole that lets attorneys take gobs of money to pass bills for clients, and you get to pay, well, I'm an attorney, and this is just my attorney's fee. It's a loophole. That the little state loophole that exists doesn't exist when it comes to the federal government. That's why I am very, very weary of the Attorney General, because I know the Attorney General has a corruption probe. Good for her. Good for the state of Arkansas. Why hasn't Rusty Cranford been charged then yet? I mean, I know he's been charged up in Missouri, but why not here yet? I mean, what else has to happen? How much more corruption do you have to see? I mean, these are legitimate questions that every citizen in Arkansas, every taxpayer in Arkansas, whether you're Democrat, Republican, whatever, need to be asking. And, because there is, of course, I mean, I don't think I'm wrong here. The Ethics Commission, I'm pretty sure there's a loophole where attorneys, that was the whole point of Linda Collins Smith bill, trying to close the loophole where attorneys cannot represent clients and pass bills for them and take money for them. Because if you were to take any other profession, doctor, you were to take any other profession, landlord, furniture salesman, car salesman, whatever, you can't pay somebody extra money to go and pass bills for you. But if you're an attorney, you can. And that's why I'm worried about the state of Arkansas. If you're using the laws that the state of Arkansas has, it's technically there's a loophole and everything's fine. It is the federal government, and I know this, they're the ones that have to get involved here, because they're the ones in the John Woods case that argued, listen, just because you're an attorney doesn't mean you can take money and pass bills for clients. They seem to argue that that's wrong, that you can't do that, that it conflicts with federal law. So we're waiting. The people are waiting for justice. And justice is supposed to be blind. Justice, it doesn't matter who you are, what your name is. It doesn't matter the political consequences. It shouldn't matter the season, the time of year. None of that should matter. The people of Arkansas are waiting for justice. And that doesn't mean 100% that somebody needs to go to jail. But I think there should be something adjudicated. I think there should be a trial for a lot of things that have come out in the news. We all know what they are. We all know who they involve, the accusations that have been made. What is going on? Where is the justice? Please, U.S. attorneys, the people of Arkansas are counting on you. And not just people on the far right like I am. It's not just me. I mean, there are plenty of Democrats who are looking for justice as well. But politics and political divisions aside, what does the law say? Has the law been broken? Are there people who have enriched themselves at taxpayer expense and have done it secretly? You betcha. You betcha. Here's the thing. A lot of that used to be secret, and now it's not secret. It's out there, right? It's in guilty plea after guilty plea after guilty plea. But where does it go after that? I know justice moves slowly, but this has been going on for a long time. I mean, the rumor mill has been going on now for, 4 years, longer than that? Something's got to give here. Anyway, we're waiting for justice. When we come back, I want to talk about U.S. Senator Tom Cotton and what he has to say about this foreign law on investments, this new law on foreign investments. That's what I meant to say. And what Donald Trump said about it, what Senator Tom Cotton said about it at the little bill signing that they had. And we're going to be back here in just a moment. The phone number, 870-275-9799. You can also sound off at facebook.com/Conduit News. And, folks, please do not forget to go to the brand new conduitnews.com. There's a great story up about the plans of the task force and their recommendation out there. If you want to know specifics about what they're recommending and how the Arkansas tax code would change, go to conduitnews.com right now. It's up on the front page. And now remember, caution yourself, a recommendation is a long way from a bill and a debate and the dirty process and the messy process, I should say, that goes on when you actually try to pass something like this into law. But it is pretty fascinating. So far, it looks like they're recommending a net loss of revenue going to the government, which would mean it would be a true tax relief plan if, in fact, it goes forward. We'll talk more about this, and we'll be back here in just a moment.
Wonderful. Thanks for allowing me to be on this morning.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. You know, listen, I think term limits is a good idea. I think taking it from 16 down to 10 is a good idea. I know there are other people that disagree. They can make arguments to the contrary, and, I respect those people, and I can respectfully disagree with them and agree to disagree and hopefully work together on other issues. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. There does seem to be some legislators out there who are, coming out and saying, listen, we think this is a terrible idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing, and I'm very grateful that we're having this debate this time, because in 2014, when the legislature put through that fraudulent amendment and deceptive amendment, we did not have that debate. So I'm glad that after a 3-year bout of laryngitis that some of them have gotten their voice back. And I think it's a healthy when we debate.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
870-275-9799. Randy on Facebook writes, demanding justice, not just passively waiting. That's a good idea, Randy, demanding justice. You know, the people, I don't know. Maybe it gets to a point where there needs to be protests and stuff. I honestly, I don't know. Maybe that's a good idea. Gene McVeigh, Republican pioneer on Facebook, is very skeptical of justice being served when it comes to the public corruption of Arkansas officials. Gene McVeigh writes on our Facebook thread, Gene, I love you. Thank you for listening this morning. He writes, Leslie Rutledge, the FBI, the Arkansas State Police, and the U.S. attorneys are busy working on jigsaw puzzles and coloring books. That is harsh. That is harsh. Surely not. Surely not. We will see what happens. But we do need to be demanding justice, not just waiting around for it. That's true, and that's what we're gonna continue to do here at Conduit News. I just think that's pretty good. That's a pretty funny thing. Okay, let's take a look at this. Senator Tom Cotton. This is from Frank Lockwood. The headline here, U.S. Senator Tom Cotton touts law on foreign investments. So what has essentially happened is they want to increase the accountability. They want to increase the oversight when it comes to foreign governments coming in America and investing here. They want to give really an increase of power to block foreign investments that pose a potential national security threat. It's called the Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act of 2018. The Foreign Investment Risk Review Modernization Act of 2018. We're talking real estate purchases that involve foreign governments or foreigners could be vetoed because of national security purposes. Also, if the land is near U.S. military installations or other sensitive government property. So it specifically says here, Frank Lockwood, that Trump met with Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas and a handful of other lawmakers at the White House on Thursday, thanking them for their efforts to pass the legislation. The president signed the bill back on August 13th. Under the previous law, the president could already block a business merger or acquisition if it threatens to impair the national security of the United States. But now, the president can prevent other investments on national security grounds if they enable foreigners to participate in substantive decision-making regarding critical technologies or critical infrastructure. Now, who is that directed at? Who is that directed at? Folks, if you missed the first hour, the big news is, aside from the fact that CNN is caught pushing a fake story for a month and their sources are outed as being bogus, we now know that the foreign government that hacked Hillary Clinton's email server, according to the Daily Caller reports, it was in fact China. The Chinese, they had a company here, and the anomaly that was found on Hillary Clinton's server in 2015 was rerouting all but 4 of her 30,000 emails to a Chinese-owned company, according to the Daily Caller. We played for you last hour Peter Strzok being interviewed by Louis Gohmert, among other things. Donald Trump quoting is saying, the new authority will enhance our ability to protect cutting-edge American technology and intellectual property value to our national security. Tom Cotton and a handful of others had been instrumental in securing passage of the updated measure, which was included in this year's Defense Authorization Act. There were others there. The Senate version, supported by Tom Cotton, would have reimposed sweeping restrictions on ZTE, a smartphone maker that sold equipment to Iran and North Korea in defiance of U.S. sanctions. Let's see here. Quote, It's a really good thing that the Congress now recognizes China as our chief long-term rival, end quote, the Republican from Dardanelle said. That's Senator Tom Cotton. What is the Arkansas angle on this? My question consistently is going to continue to be, if that is true, why would we give our Arkansas taxpayer dollars to communist Chinese companies to move here? To move here. Come on. This is supposed to be a government that protects the people, not auctions our freedoms off to the highest bidder.
Wonderful. Thanks for allowing me to be on this morning.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. You know, listen, I think term limits is a good idea. I think taking it from 7 down to 10 is a good idea. I know there are other people that disagree. You know, they can make arguments to the contrary, and, you know, I respect those people, and I can respectfully disagree with them and agree to disagree and hopefully work together on other issues. But I just wanted to get your thoughts on this. There does seem to be some legislators out there who are, you know, coming out and saying, listen, we think this is a terrible idea.
Well, I think it's a great thing, and I'm very grateful that we're having this debate this time, because in 2014, when the legislature put through that fraudulent amendment and deceptive amendment, we did not have that debate. So I'm glad that after a 3-year bout of laryngitis that some of them have gotten their voice back. And I think it's a healthy when we debate this statewide. Good people can disagree about this, but everyone can agree that deception does not work in Arkansas and has no place in Arkansas politics. And that's exactly what the legislature and the lobbyists did in 2014.
And that is a great point, and I feel like that to me is the one reason, is probably the biggest motivator to vote for this. You know, aside from the fact, at the end of the day, it's like, hey, do you think 16 years is good, or do you think a decade is good? And I'm like, okay, a decade's fine. Let's, you know, you go past a decade, it really can become a career, and not for, you know, career politicians. But the main thing here, and I've been trying to talk about this a little bit, is that what John Woods did, you know, convicted felon John, and now really the rest of the General Assembly too, because, and I people that did speak out against it at the time, but like you said, there wasn't this kind of debate that we're having right now. Now we're having a much broader debate with more people involved. Our own government lied to the people intentionally. They intentionally, we can blame most of it on John Woods, but the fact is the rest of the General Assembly voted for it. They voted for the title, and it went there. It was deceptive, and our own government lied to us, and now the people are taking the pendulum, and we're attempting to swing it back. And I don't think anybody should be surprised by that. I think that's a healthy thing.
I tend to agree with you. I think it's very healthy, and let's be sure to point out that senators can now stay 22 years, depending on how those 2-year terms fall. 22 years is not a term limit. That's a limit that anybody who doesn't believe in term limits could live with. So it's gone from 22, and here is the question Arkansas voters have to ask themselves. Do we want to live by an amendment written in silence
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up? It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. Always great to be able to talk to you every morning. I want to welcome back to the program. We have Dr. Michael Busler with us. He's a public policy analyst, an economics expert, a professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. You've probably seen him as a columnist at Newsmax, LifeZet, and townhall.com. Dr. Busler, welcome back, sir.
Hi, Paul. How are you? It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really had a blast talking with you last week, and I wanted to have you on again because I'm looking over some of the stuff that Arkansas is thinking about doing, and I know there's a lot of ideas get proposed across the country at a state level, but one of those ideas that we're talking about here in Arkansas is moving away from a gas tax, a traditional gas tax per gallon, and going to indexing our fuel taxes. Can you tell us what index fuel taxes are?
Okay, so not all states, most states put a tax on gasoline, so many cents per gallon, and they, in theory, use the revenue to help pay for road improvements and infrastructure. So your government officials are saying, look, we raise tax revenue to pay what we have to pay for, but every year, because of inflation, it costs us more to build the roads and the infrastructure. So in order to make sure we have enough revenue to do that, we're going to index the gas tax to inflation. In other words, if you put a 20 cent per gallon tax on gasoline and inflation is 3%, you're going to raise the 20 cent tax by 3%, and you're going to keep doing that every year to make sure there's sufficient revenue to pay the expenses. And that's the theory with doing it. Personally, I think it's a terrible idea. It ends up guaranteeing that you get a tax increase every year, number one. And number two, going back to the theory as to why you need it in the first place, you could argue you really don't need it, because if inflation is 3%, then on average the price of gasoline is going to go up 3% also, so you're getting your increase anyway. This is a terrible idea. It's just a way to increase the amount of taxes that consumers pay. And remember, when you put a tax on any consumption, any goods that consumers purchase, if you put a tax on consumption, it's a regressive tax, which means the lower income earners feel it more than the upper income earners. So from that aspect, I don't think it's fair. It's something that's certainly not needed. My vote would be don't do it. The state of Maine had it in, and just recently, because it caused so much problems with consumers, just recently they decided to reverse it and just go back to how they had it before, a certain amount per gallon.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that about Maine. I'm going to look into that. So Maine had an indexed fuel tax system, and they've gone back the other way because it's, I mean, it's nice for people who want more and more revenue going to the government, and you're basically saying that this is going to enable, it guarantees them pretty much every year an increase in revenue from the people when it comes to paying for gasoline.
Exactly, and it affects the lower income earners the hardest, because most of their income goes to consumption. They don't, because they have low income, they can't save a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you put a tax on any products that consumers buy, any consumption, it's a regressive tax, and I don't favor regressive taxes at all.
Yeah, and folks, there's an article at the front page right now at conduitnews.com. It's a report on the task force on tax reform. And while right now it appears it's a net loss of revenue to the government, meaning more money back in the hands of the people, one of the proposals is to index fuel taxes, indexing them based on inflation rates of construction costs, the minimum of current year rate, max at 3% over the tax rate of the previous year. This could really drive more revenue in the long run over the future. So it certainly is a little bit of a red flag, and that's why I wanted to have Dr. Busler on to talk about this so he could explain exactly what this is and everything else. And so I certainly appreciate that. I want to get your take on, when we had you on last week, Dr. Busler, we talked a little bit about China and the tariffs and the trade war, and I love how you said, listen, I'm a free market economist, and so when you hear the word tariffs, it kind of makes you cringe. But then you also had some good things to say about the results of some of the negotiating tactics of the Trump administration. Can you kind of refresh us on that real quick?
Yeah, so Trump, too, is a free market person. He would rather have zero tariffs on everything. So he looks at the trade agreements we have, the NAFTA and with the European Union and with China and a few other countries, and he saw that they were all slanted in favor of our trading partners and to the detriment of us. For instance, with the European Union, they make a car in Germany or Italy, sell it here in the U.S., we charge them 2.5% tariff. American car companies produce a car here, sell it in Europe, they charge us a 10% tariff. Well, the result of that is we're buying a lot of their cars, money flowing out of the country when we pay for it. They're buying fewer of our cars, not much money of theirs is flowing in our country. We end up with a huge negative balance of trade to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars every year. Well, Trump said we have to fix this. So he talks to the trading partners and said, hey, we have to renegotiate. They're in no hurry to renegotiate. They're in a great position. So, if Trump was a politician, what would happen is they would convene a summit sometime in October. Our people would talk to their people. They'd come back. We'd discuss it for another 6 months. They'd meet again. And before you know it, you end up kicking the can down the road to the next guy, and nothing happens. President Trump says he's a business person. He's not a politician. A business person has to confront problems immediately because it's going to affect your bottom line. You can't have that happening. So Trump wanted to confront this as quickly as possible. You have trading partners who are reluctant to come to the table. So what does a business person do? You create a sense of urgency. So by putting on the tariffs on China, and they're going to hurt the Chinese far more than their Chinese retaliation will hurt us. China's economy depends on selling much of their output to the rest of the world, and much of that goes to the U.S. So if we stop buying their products, they're going to be in trouble, particularly considering all the debt they've used to run this up. Mm-hmm. So we put these big tariffs on, and the idea is let's bring them to the table and come up with a free trade agreement, trying to get as close as possible to no tariffs on anything.
So my next question, we're talking to Dr. Michael Busler. What do you think about economic incentive programs when it comes to the government picking winners and losers, and winners essentially in this case, when they give taxpayer money or incentives to try to bring companies in to quote, create jobs? What are your general thoughts on that economic development idea?
Yeah, this is a difficult issue. Your first choice would be to have an American company come in, build, and you not have to give any incentives. That would be your first choice. If you can't get that, then the next choice is, there are companies that are building plants that we'd like to have in our area. For instance, Amazon is building a new headquarters, and they've looked at a bunch of sites. Each site is offering them a tremendous amount of tax incentives to locate in their municipality. And, of course, the reason is simple. Once Amazon comes with, I think they're looking at 50,000 employees, it's an economic boon to the area. So people say, well, look, if we use some taxpayer money to lure them here, we're going to more than get it back. Now, there's some debate whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but that's the theory. Now, suppose you have a foreign company from China, for instance, looking to build a plant in the U.S. Well, we'd like to get the plant here you would say, in Arkansas, so we may have to give some incentives to lure them here. Is it a good idea or a bad idea? Well, as long as the foreign company like China is not doing anything with proprietary knowledge and is not stealing any trade secrets or anything, but if they're coming to build a plant in the U.S. anyway, you'd like to get it in Arkansas, perhaps you can use some tax dollars to lure the company here. So there's no real clear-cut answer whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. It depends on what side you're coming down on. Clearly, you don't want to use taxpayer money to go to a company outside of the U.S. On the other hand, if you can invest $100 of taxpayer money and it generates $1,000 worth of activity with new jobs and the purchasing power that the new employees have, that may be a good investment.
You know, I really appreciate your thoughts on that. I mean, I to be honest, I disagree with the concept of, giving taxpayer dollars to companies to try to get them to locate here, because I think if they can be recruited here, they can be recruited away. I would rather just, eliminate the corporate income tax and things like that, try to treat all businesses equally. Here in Arkansas, it's a strange situation because we have a skilled workforce shortage. And so we have a situation here, Dr. Bustler, where existing Arkansas businesses and their tax dollars are going to recruit, whether it's China or whether it's any company, a business to come in here and then be able to hire existing employees away, right, at a higher subsidized wage, and they claim that that's a job created, when in fact that's not a job created. I mean, how many of these jobs are going to be filled by people who are right now on the couch, watching TV? And that's where, that's where the rub is how do you actually gauge the effectiveness of this? But regardless of that, I'm a realist. I understand. Look, I may disagree with this, but all states are doing it. Every state out there sweetens the pie and does that sort of thing. So, but my question is this. If you have China and you have the fact that they're stealing $600 billion of intellectual property a year, according to estimates, and then you have this trade war, it really doesn't make much sense to me to do business with China in the state of Arkansas like we are. We are attempting, not just with one, but with 3 other companies. I know one of them may still go through, but the other 3 are on hold because of the trade war. But it just doesn't make sense. And my question is this. If this were Russia, I feel like everybody would, kind of spin out of control if we were trying to cut these deals with a Russian company. But because it's China, it's somehow more acceptable, even though we have the FBI saying, hey, look, we've got investigations into their economic activity in all 50 states. They're stealing from us. They're trying to supplant the United States. What are your thoughts? Is it wise to do business with China given the current geopolitical situation?
Well, I think it's wise to do business with them if we have agreements with them that protect some of the vital interests of the U.S. You made a very key statement there. You said here in Arkansas we really have a shortage of high-skilled labor. If that's the case, there's very little reason to spend taxpayer dollars to bring in companies that are going to take some of the high-skilled labor away from Arkansas companies. The areas that are offering incentives are areas where they have an oversupply of labor and they really need new companies to come in to provide jobs. Based on what you said, that's not the case in Arkansas. So I think the argument for subsidizing Chinese companies to come in and take skilled labor when you don't have enough to go around as it is, I think that argument goes away, and I don't think now it makes any sense to spend taxpayer dollars to bring Chinese companies in.
I appreciate you coming on the program. It's always great to talk to you, Dr. Michael Bustler. And I followed you on Twitter after our interview. Did you see that? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that, yes.
All right, folks,
appreciate that.
It's at M. Bustler, at MBUSLER on Twitter. Follow him. He is an economics professor, finance professor at Stockton University, public policy analyst, and you can see him as a columnist over at Newsmax, LifeZet, and townhall.com. Dr. Bustler, thank you so much for spending time with us this morning.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
All righty. Thank you. Folks, we're going to take a break. We're going to be back here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your 7th Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the 7th Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, You believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
By a convicted felon who's defrauded the state of Arkansas, or are we going to have an amendment written by the people that, in most part, has already won 2 landslide elections?
Mm-hmm.
We've got to decide whether the legislature is going to set their own terms or the people are going to have to say so. The biggest problem with this issue is that we've had 2 statewide landslide elections, and the so-called representatives of the people do not represent the people. They have not accepted the will of the people. They have not accepted the vote. They haven't respected voters, and they haven't respected the vote. And we have to get back to that situation here.
One of the, negative aspects of this, according to the opponents of this term limits initiative that's on the ballot, is that bureaucrats will be empowered. And
Bob Maloney here from ASA News, The Parrot. Breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. Over now to our new on-site reporter, Susan Shenanigans. Susan?
Thanks, Bob. The governor has just announced that a blue ribbon task force is to be formed.
Today, I'm asking your support for a blue ribbon legislative task force to be created and directed to recommend further reform.
Now we go live to the chamber to listen in for more information on the task force.
I hereby call this session into order. First on the agenda for today is the formation of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Is there anyone who would like to give their thoughts on the task force?
Yes, as someone who's deeply conservative, why is the governor choosing the color blue for this task force? Sounds like he's really a Democrat loyalist. Why not a red ribbon to prove he's a true conservative?
Well, I represent Walmart, and we agree with the color of the task force ribbon. The color blue is best consistent with the Walmart brand.
I object to this choice. Blue is the wrong color ribbon for this task force.
Well, who are you?
I am Mr. P.C. Wrights, and I represent Target, and we want the ribbon to be red, not blue.
Hold it right there. This seems like a tough decision. Why not ask the governor to call a special session at a later date for an important decision as this?
I think this is something worth talking about. I motion that we decide the color of the ribbon today.
I second it. Fine. We can decide it now. Does anyone have any other suggestions for the color of the ribbon?
I think the color should be white.
Whoa. Hold on. Definitely not white.
I agree with Mr. P.C. Wrights. Maybe we should choose green for the farmers.
You like the color green because you are a farmer. I think it should be purple, so we can display how Arkansas is an extremely moderate state.
Why are we even discussing this? Shouldn't we be talking about tax reform instead of wasting time with this?
Well, the people have spoken. They believe this is worth talking about, so we are deciding this now.
Excuse me, sir, but shouldn't the color of the ribbon be rainbow to include all types of people?
Please, silence your phones.
I just received a call from Walmart HQ, and they agree with, what was your name again? My name is Fabulous. They agree with Fabulous that the color should be rainbow.
Target concurs with the decision of it being rainbow-colored ribbon.
Is there a motion to make the ribbon rainbow-colored?
I motion to make the color rainbow.
I second the motion. The motion carries because I said so.
The committee will now vote and not be on record to keep the people in the dark. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for listening to ASA News, The Parrot. Next up, there are reports of a gorilla on top of the Capitol Dome demanding massive sums of taxpayer cash. His name? Medicaid expansion.
WHP Parody.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Tomorrow on the program, we'll be talking with the Family Council President Jerry Cox about Issue 1. Interesting stuff that's happened on Twitter. We're also going to be talking, not with Jerry Cox, I'm sorry. Somebody called and told me about an interesting exchange on Twitter. We maybe get to that on Thursday. I think it had something to do with State Representative Charlie Collins and judges being able to lower jury verdicts or, jury. What am I trying to say? See, I can't even say it. I don't even know. Lower judgments, meaning, just like Michael Morton did and got the $10,000 bribe for. Remember that? So I'll talk to Joey McCutcheon on Thursday about that as well as what happened with State Representative Bob Ballinger at this meeting on Friday at the Political Animals Club. That was pretty interesting. Folks, up at conduitnews.com, the Tax Task Force approved its final report. This is the headline. The Arkansas Tax Task Force met again this week. The committee approved a 20-page final report outlining their recommended tax changes ahead of the 2019 legislative session. Immediately after they approved their final report, Paul Gehring of the Department of Finance and Administration outlined a new income tax proposal from Governor Asa Hutchinson. The new plan would be a two-part phased-in income tax cut that would result in just one tax table with 4, then 3 brackets. It would also triple the standard deduction here in Arkansas. This mirrors the similar type reform at the federal level last year. Currently, the Arkansas standard deduction is $2,200 for single filers and $4,400 for married couples. Under the proposal, the standard deduction would increase to $6,800 for single filers and $13,600 for married couples. Phase 1 of the 2-4, 245.9. I see 2.4 to 5.9%. /6.5% plan. Anyway, if you want to check out the tables here, very interesting stuff. You also have a final report breakdown of different proposals, whether it's a tax increase or whether it's a tax decrease and that sort of thing. Again, so far it appears that even though there may be tweaks here and there, that the net plan is a net reduction in revenue from the people to the government, which would mean that it's a tax cut if they actually do what they say they're going to do. We're going to be watching this story carefully. In the meantime, have you heard that legislators are victims? Have you heard that legislators are victims? Well, they are. Go ahead, Joe. Real quick, before we go to break, we have to play this. So before we end the show is what I meant to say. Before we end the show, before we go on like a 23-hour break, we have to play this for you one last time. Not one last time, just one time.
I am really disappointed for a profession that gets beat up as much as we do, where they, only good lawyer is a dead lawyer, right? And, all that stuff, right? For somebody who gets beat up as much as we do, for people to just beat up the legislature. My friends in the legislature are servants. They not one of them up there right now benefiting from being in this business. They have set themselves aside.
Working hard, representing us. Not one of them down there is benefiting from being down there. Interesting set of facts there, right? Perception versus reality. The Marble Palace sure has its ways, doesn't it? We've got to take a long break here. We're going to be back here tomorrow at 6 a.m., 6:05 a.m. You can get this broadcast and others like it up at conduitnews.com. Just click on Conduit News Radio, and you'll get the rest of the broadcasts. Also podcasts on iTunes and SoundCloud. Arkansas, be safe.